Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show focused on the ideas, projects, and people building the new digital economy and the future of money. If you're brand new to Bitcoin and would like to learn more, please visit letstalkbitcoin.com/learn to be directed to the Bitcoin Education Project. Coming up on today's show, listener mail, the outrageous legal looting system. Results from our week-long experiment with Bitmessage. Certainty is on the blockchain. Are notaries obsolete? Stephanie Murphy's interview with Charlie, creator of Litecoin. OKPay, Mt. Gox, and the largest money laundering network in the world. We look behind the hype. If you like what we're doing and want to support us with Bitcoin or Litecoin donations, please visit letstalkbitcoin.com for episode-specific addresses. My name is Adam B. Levine. I'm a writer and speaker who likes to talk about complicated topics in understandable terms. We're back and nearly in real time after a journey to the Bitcoin 2013 conference. I'm very excited to be joined, as always, by the other hosts of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Andreas M. Antonopoulos is an expert in distributed systems and decentralized networks.
Hello.
Dr. Stephanie Murphy is a scientist and syndicated radio host.
Hi.
This is the first show now that we've done in, I want to say, 2 weeks. Now, we had pre-recorded stuff before that, so I'm really excited to be kind of getting back into this and able to talk about some of these pressing issues.
Yeah, Andreas said he was going through withdrawals before.
Yeah. I missed you guys so much.
Aww. We're back together now. The gang's all here.
So while we were gone, we definitely built up a backlog of listener email, and so we're going to try and get through those, probably one per show until we get through it, if we ever get through it. So feel free to keep sending listener mail, but just know that there's going to be a little bit of backlog before it gets addressed on the show if it's that sort of thing.
This is from David, and he said, I just listened to the latest installment of Let's Talk Bitcoin, which was actually, I think, episode 8 at this point. So it's a couple shows ago. And he says, I wanted to express my appreciation of your stance on the government topic. Oh, I got a lot of opinions about that either way on both sides. He said, it's a really broad concept, but I agree that certainly there is no existing legislation on cryptocurrencies. We should indeed not bend over backwards to accommodate an already outrageous legal looting system. In Israel, they would call this a kit bag question, and then he linked me to Urban Dictionary. A kit bag question is basically, there's some soldiers in the Israeli army. A kit bag is like a very heavy bag that's full of supplies and stuff. And the sergeant says, okay, report to here at this time. And the soldier says, okay, do I have to bring my kit bag? And then the sergeant says, yes, of course. And if he hadn't have asked that question, he wouldn't have had to do it. So that's what he means. It's basically, don't ask permission, ask forgiveness, essentially expressing that kind of sentiment. So then David says, my way of looking at it is that there will be a Bitcoin freedom fiesta until a certain market cap is reached in a few years. Let's party hard until then. Then governments will attempt and probably will at least partially succeed in taxing and or outlawing the currency. CFR, the gold confiscation of April 5th, 1933. Points of attack. 1. Exchanges. 2. Stores accepting Bitcoin. 3. Individual scapegoats. It will likely still have value, but it will start leading to an underground black market life, just like undeclared cash or drugs. Curious about your prognosis. Thanks for adding fun to the show. So what do you guys think? Is Bitcoin going to be illegal? Is it gloom and doom in the future? When I read his email, I kind of started thinking the level of freedom when it comes to Bitcoin is inversely proportional to the length of the blockchain, right? So as time goes on, Bitcoin is going to get less free. But I don't know. I think with the nature of Bitcoin, it's always going to be decentralized. So I don't know if it could ever be completely outlawed. I certainly agree with him that the government is probably going to try to put pressure on exchanges and individuals and stores and merchants that are accepting Bitcoin, and they already are. But then again, if they did manage to prohibit it, prohibited items, if people still want them, always go up in price. So there's always that factor. What do you guys think?
I'm a bit of an optimist here, and that's a rare thing for me, but I would say that I don't think Bitcoin is going to get banned. I don't think it's going to be regulated out of existence. I think there's going to be more focus on Bitcoin, which is going to lead to more regulations and tightening up the rules around anti-money laundering at the exchange points. But beyond that, I think most governments are going to take a wait-and-see approach and at least for the foreseeable future, it's not going to be banned. It's not going to be regulated out of existence. And by the time that somebody decides they want to do that, it's going to be too late. I think it's already too late. The cat is already out of the bag. And I do really see governments understand that. They understand that stomping Bitcoin will only draw more attention to Bitcoin and will make it more viable in other countries if they do that. So I'm not worried at all.
The idea of putting pressure on individual scapegoats shows how smart Satoshi was to kind of disappear and like let the cat out of the bag and then go, oh, well, it's out of my hands now. Bitcoin is like Pandora's box, right? And before it was opened, yeah, it could have been suppressed. It could have been held down. But now we're past that point. It's like the internet. It's like BitTorrent. It's not able to be suppressed. So I guess I share your optimism, Andreas, for sure.
I'll play the counterpoint here then. It's easy to say that it's beyond the tipping point, but I don't really think that's the case. I think that, we surround ourselves by people who understand this, to a certain extent, reality as it is, and the opportunity that is there because of that reality. He outlines a couple of really interesting points, notably that the exchanges, we're talking about centralized exchanges, people who accept, and then potential scapegoats. You're right about Satoshi being smart, but there are a lot of other people out there who could potentially be made into these scapegoats or, really whatever you want to call them, martyrs. I mean, really is what they're going to wind up being. People who wind up going to jail because somebody has to go to jail in order to prove that this situation is serious enough. And I do think that we're probably going to reach a point where that happens just because the conflict with the existing power structure is so unbalanced. Bitcoin, if it fails, does nothing and doesn't matter. But Bitcoin, if it succeeds, is very, very disruptive in a very damaging way to the existing power structure. And I just can't imagine that that's going to be let to go by itself. On the exchanges side, I think that we're already seeing what's going to happen here. We're seeing a crackdown on centralized exchanges, and we're seeing a rise of decentralized exchanges. They're not functional yet, but there are 3 or 4 very functional specifications that are floating around. And there's also a unconfirmed rumor that there's going to be a rather large X prize put in place over the next year to essentially incentivize development of very high performing and frankly successful decentralized exchanges. So there's that side of it. All government has to do in order to make it very, very difficult to transact is simply say, if you're a store, it's illegal to do business in both Bitcoin and the US dollar, or whatever your local currency is. Say that, you can't. So if they say that you can't, it doesn't even matter if they have the right to say that you can't. It just matters that that's what the rule is. And so if that's what the rule is, then anybody who goes against the rule is breaking the rules, is a criminal. So I think that even if it's enforceable, even if it's legal, even if whatever, it almost doesn't matter. What's important is that people are scared of losing what they already have. And so if you're scared of losing what you already have, then the incentives to make this switch are very different than if you think that, oh, well, this is just going to be fine and everything's going to be okay. I mean, if I was sitting on the side of someone who wanted to make sure that Bitcoin didn't disrupt the existing system, then that's the way I'd be looking at it.
I think we're overestimating, first of all, the capacity of government to act rationally and strategically over the long term rather than knee-jerk reaction. And I'm not that from that perspective. I'd like to first make a point of mythology. Rather than calling it a Pandora's box, I really like the idea of Satoshi as Prometheus, takes fire from the gods and gives it to the people, and permanently changes the balance of power for the human race. Satoshi is Prometheus. He gave us the new fire of free money. I really like that mythology a bit better, so I'm going to push it out there. Anyway,
I do too, and I will defer to you on the Greek mythology.
Absolutely, I'm an expert. I had to suffer through it at school for many years.
So how'd that work for Prometheus?
Oh, well, yeah, not so well. If I'm not mistaken, he's the one who was tied to a rock and had an eagle eat his liver over and over and over again, but... that happened. That's exactly why Satoshi was smart enough to vamoosh. At the end of the day, I don't think it's that easy to just declare something illegal. At least in this country, there's still a constitution, there's still due process, and if you can afford lawyers, you can fight it. There are enough big corporations in Bitcoin with extended interest right now that can hire lawyers and fight this all the way to the Supreme Court. And one of the interesting things that's happened over the last decade is that we firmly established the precedent that money is a form of speech. That's kind of an uncomfortable situation to be in if you want to ban it because, First Amendment and all, there's a reason it's first.
Well, at least it's a form of speech or considered a form of speech for corporations making campaign contributions, right? I think that would be great to turn that sort of Supreme Court decision into something that gives more power to people just using Bitcoin.
Well, it's exactly a matter of due process and being able to set precedents. And of course, these things cut both ways, which is if you try to prosecute a company for using Bitcoin and they do succeed in taking it all the way to Supreme Court, the precedent that could set is so damaging that, I would say that the government would be probably more likely to try and avoid creating that situation. I don't see an outright ban ever happening, honestly. Extrajudicial pressure and monkeying around and trying to foreclose on landlords who host businesses and seizures. We've seen those kinds of underhanded tactics used by governments all the time. I expect more of that from scared local U.S. attorneys more than anything else. But in the end, I don't think it really makes a difference. We can evolve beyond this, and there's enough interest and enough value in the currency. The people who are willing to fight to keep it around. The other thing is, we talk about the powers that be and their defensive approach to Bitcoin. I don't think they're dumb enough to simply kill it. I think they are much smarter than that, and they'd like to co-opt it. So it's more likely in my mind that Bitcoin gets corporatized, co-opted, and used by Goldman Sachs and HSBC and Wells Fargo and all of the other big banks in order to gain advantage in the global marketplace, because they do know how to adapt to technology. Let's not kid ourselves.
Something you said earlier, Andreas, kind of speaks to the concept of critical mass. I mean, if there are enough people who are using Bitcoin, and believe me, I think we're far from that point. We're still in the very early adopter stages. If there are enough people who are using Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis, what are they realistically going to do? It's like if everybody jaywalks or everybody breaks the speed limit, they can't realistically enforce it on everybody. And so I think it's very much in our interest to get as many people using Bitcoin as possible. And that's something that I'm planning on doing, along with, as David said, I guess, partying hard and enjoying the new things that are coming out about Bitcoin right now and all the things that we can do with it.
I'd add to that, getting as many businesses, especially businesses that are trying to do very legitimate, above-the-board type of work, get as many of those to adopt Bitcoin. Because as I said before, corporations are the only people who have due process nowadays.
Two parts in his email. He says that we probably have a couple of years. I'm willing to buy your thesis and say that, okay, fine, I'm overreacting on this and nothing's going to happen. But I think that if something is going to happen, it'll happen this year. Within the next 12 months, this is the time when you can still functionally make a move like this. Because like you said, Stephanie, as adoption grows, it gets harder and harder to make these distinctions because as the use grows, more people can say, oh, okay, well, I'm not using it for those terrible things that they're ascribing to it, so it's not that for me. The longer they wait to do anything about it, the more difficult it becomes for them to do it. Then on the other side of it, something we didn't talk about much was the kit bag question, right? Is it even a good idea for the community of Bitcoin or users of Bitcoin to approach this topic and to say, hey, when are you going to regulate? What's the plan for regulation? Because it might be inviting it in a way where otherwise it wouldn't even be something that would be thought about. At the conference, we learned that one of the Bitcoin Foundation's next moves is to hire a single lobbyist and to send that single lobbyist to Washington in order to represent the needs of Bitcoin community as a whole. I think they're working on behalf of the foundation specifically, but they're supposed to represent the Bitcoin community as a whole. Anybody here ever read Atlas Shrugged?
Absolutely. One of my favorite novels.
In that novel, one of the things that happens is the, quasi good guys, the railroad people, they basically have a single lobbyist who is representing their interests in Washington, and he's functionally co-opted very quickly by the system because they're paying him a certain amount of money. He's surrounded by all of these people who have other interests, and they're also willing to pay him money in order to essentially betray his interests. And so this is a question that I've been asking of some of our interview subjects, and I'm curious what you guys think. Do you think that there is a possible positive outcome from having a single lobbyist?
Absolutely.
I don't.
Okay, so Andreas, why do you think there is a good outcome? What does the good outcome look like?
So the good outcome is really simple, which is that having a lobbyist in itself means that you are a business that is willing to pursue its interests with money, support the election and funding of candidates. At the end of the day, most elected officials only care about one thing, and that's getting reelected. They have a very short focus. That focus is taken up only by those who have the access and ability to speak to them directly. So in a cynical way, I would say votes don't matter. Faxes and emails and letters and petitions don't matter. Lobbyists who can get an appointment, come into your office, and talk to you intelligently about Bitcoin make a difference. Unfortunately, our system has been perverted to the point where the only way to get your voice into the halls of power is through lobbyists. It's simply a pragmatic recognition that the system is broken and those are the rules, and playing by those rules actually is the only way you can have a voice in the game. Now, if you decide you don't want to have a voice in the game and just opt out completely, that's a whole other situation. But if you want to have a voice in the game, then you have to play by the rules, and that means money and lobbying.
So it's a combination of symbolism and evangelism, then, is what you view a single lobby. I mean, that's the purpose here. It says we want to participate in the system, and we're willing to jump through the hoops and do the things that, that are required by everybody in order to play in the system, which is having a lobbyist, paying for them, basically making that a thing. And then on the other side of it, being able to effectively communicate why Bitcoin is relevant to interested politicians in a way that they're already accustomed to receiving. Is that right?
The lobbyist's job is to be there and constantly drive to have meetings with the lawmakers and participate in gatherings and participate in events and basically keep pounding that point. There are businesses that use Bitcoin. It's a legitimate currency, and it will fund your next campaign. Emphasis on the last point. And of course that works because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Lawmakers listen to the people who are right in front of them saying things on behalf of business more than they do their constituents. It's a simple truth.
One Bitcoin lobbyist is like David and Goliath against the biggest force in American politics, which is effectively an anti-Bitcoin lobby. The big banks. Their voice is just going to be drowned out. Any real representation is pretty much impossible with lone Bitcoin lobbyist.
It's better than no lobbyist, though, and us just...
David could be, slinging at Goliath and kind of wake him up and arouse him to take action. Personally, I prefer the opt-out approach as much as possible. Do what I'm doing, use Bitcoin, try to tell people about it, and not asking politicians for permission.
Let's just assume for a second, Stephanie, I know that you're fundamentally against this lobbying thing, but if someone was going to be lobbying, do you think that it is the role of the foundation to be doing that? Or do you think that companies like BitPay or these venture-funded services are the ones who should be having lobbyists? I mean, again, it's a decentralized system, so there's kind of a question about where this action should be coming from, if it should be happening at all.
What's the distinction? I mean, essentially the foundation represents all of the VC-funded and big businesses in the space. So the entire board is CEOs from the business, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, essentially, it's our association of businesses that is able to speak for all of the Bitcoin businesses and join resources and collaborate to bring that message. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's already doing exactly what you're talking about, Adam.
Bitcoin is decentralized, and I understand that. It's a big community, and not everybody agrees on these things, and so I couldn't and wouldn't want to prohibit some organization like the Bitcoin Foundation using their funds to hire a lobbyist. I don't support it, but I can't stop them.
I'm a member of the Bitcoin Foundation, and there are a lot of people who are members of the Bitcoin Foundation, and I haven't been vocally opposed to lobbying because I'm, just kind of agnostic about it and curious to see what happens with it. I just have concerns about what it could potentially lead to. There has been kind of a big reaction from parts of the community who are paying members of the foundation and find themselves really, really disagreeing with what the foundation is doing. So that's why I was asking, should this be the corporations? Because yeah, the corporations are part of the foundation, but the foundation has a large individual membership as well who all pay to be part of it. To my knowledge, this was never a question that was really brought up to the membership, whether or not this was something that they thought was a good idea.
I'm a member too, and to my knowledge, nothing has ever been brought up to the membership. So I don't know. It seems to me that that's a whole separate problem, which is the fact that the foundation doesn't have a process, doesn't have incentives, and doesn't see the need to involve the membership in discussions like this. I think membership simply means we paid for this funding. I don't think it means what some of us think it means, which is that a member has some say other than electing the board. I think they've been pretty clear in the rules that electing the board is the only job of a member. And that's fine. You know, we elect a different board if we don't like what they're doing. They're not really a participatory system, that's for sure.
Or form a splinter organization. You know, maybe it's time for a competing Bitcoin foundation, although not by the same name, for people who have disagreements with what they're doing.
There have been proposals for that. I'm really curious to see what the tipping point winds up being that, you know, makes people actually want to fork the concept and go off and do their own thing.
Easy enough to do with the code. So yeah, why not with the foundation? Just start a fork.
It's just a question of, you know, what the tipping point is, you know, what the last straw is as far as I'm concerned. The business model that all of the current corporate participants in the foundation, you know, so we're talking about like BitPay, BitInstant, CoinLab, I think is there. There are a number of other companies. All of these companies are stopgap companies. Their entire business model and profitability is based on the idea that the existing financial system does not want to interact with the Bitcoin space. And so because of that, these elaborate workarounds have to be created where you jump from payment processor to payment processor or whatever in order to somehow move from your local currency into a place where you can purchase Bitcoins with it. If this lobbying effort succeeds and the guidance becomes clear and it's obvious that Bitcoin isn't going to be outlawed or, you know, anything like that, then doesn't that mean that the opportunity is perfect and completely right for existing financial structures to say, okay, well, now it's safe, so I guess we'll come in and completely invalidate these business models and getting millions of dollars worth of venture funding over the last couple of months on the idea that they have this enormous growth potential? Are these early Bitcoin companies working against their own best interest in this particular part?
I have to imagine that they value or believe that first mover advantage and deep knowledge of the technology, and also the distrust that the community feels for the large financial organizations gives them a continued advantage that will keep other entrants out, or at least give them a big enough niche and growth that they can justify their funding. And really, they haven't received that much funding. Let's not kid ourselves.
Want to set up an online store that accepts Bitcoins? Go to openbitcoinstore.com and you can have a store up and running before the end of this message. Just enter your email address and the store name, and in less than 30 seconds, you'll have a secure WordPress e-commerce site up and running that accepts Bitcoins and pays you in cash within 24 hours. And best of all, it's completely free. Go to openbitcoinstore.com today and open for business now.
You're listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin, the premier audiocast providing news and insights that cover the rapidly evolving world of digital money. Our twice-weekly show include analysis of late-breaking news, updates on key technical, business, and regulatory issues, and in-depth interviews with the key people driving the new digital economy. Let's Talk Bitcoin offers sponsors an attractive way to reach a targeted and savvy audience. For more information, email sponsors at letstalkbitcoin.com.
I've been playing with this new program. It's called Bitmessage. And what Bitmessage is a decentralized peer-to-peer encrypted communication system that is based on Bitcoin. So it's almost like moving Bitcoins around, but instead of moving coins on the blockchain, you're kind of moving messages, and it's based on a proof of work algorithm that your computer does to send the message. And the cool thing about this is you can use this little program and you can create as many addresses as you want to receive and send messages. So potentially you can use these throwaway identities and you can keep your identity as well as the identity of whoever you're communicating with potentially anonymous if you want to, and it's encrypted. So I've been playing with it and it's really cool. Have you guys had a chance to try it out?
I have not. I've tried to, but because I use a Mac, it's not a very straightforward installation at the moment. So I'm trying to find out how to get it to work and then possibly release a package as a DMG installable so it's easier for others too. But I'm very interested in seeing how it works. I've been waiting for the ability to do communication that is secure since, I don't know, 1991, because we've had PGP and email, but the two shall never meet. It's been almost 2 decades of waiting for broad adoption of encrypted email, and right now it's amazing to me that if I want to encrypt an email and send it to someone else, I can't. It's as simple as that. I have to do this elaborate dance of setup. So maybe if it's attached to your wallet and it has the same technology and semantics that your wallet has, maybe this is the way that more secure messaging happens. I'm also very interested in some of the secondary effects and capabilities, because you can overlay a lot of other interesting message passing algorithms for other protocols on top of this. So it's a great idea.
Just to clarify, Andreas, I'm not sure if this is what you meant, but it's not actually attached to any Bitcoin wallet, just sort of in principle or in the setup or how it works. It's its own system, it's its own client, and you have addresses within Bitmessage that don't receive coins, but they do receive messages. But like you said, you can overlay it with a lot of these Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency technologies for some really interesting applications that I think we're going to talk about. I wanted to say, I think it's really cool that, Andreas, to hear you say, well, we don't have this program for Mac, so maybe I'll just create it. I think that's awesome.
Well, just repackaging, really, because it does run on a Mac. It's just a bit of a pain to get it to install properly. What I meant really is that it's not as much part of your wallet, but that it uses the same technology, the same user interface, more or less, and most importantly, the same metaphors. Because once you understand that giving someone your public wallet address allows them to send you money without revealing your security, then it's easy to understand how giving them your Bitmessage address allows them to send you messages. So it helps now that public key cryptography becomes more mainstream through the wallet, and therefore when you try to add an extra concept, which is sending messages, you can say, well, it's just like sending money, only sending messages. It's easier to adopt that way. I think the concepts are connected, and that's really powerful.
One of the interesting things about Bitmessage versus Bitcoin, though, is that it doesn't actually have a blockchain. It has the same sort of networking relationship where when you send a message, it sits there and crunches it for a couple of minutes while it's doing the necessary proof of work, just like the Bitcoin system does. Except it's you doing it right there, as opposed to it being sent to a miner who picks it up and then does the proof of work at that point to include. It broadcasts the message out there. Nodes pick it up and rebroadcast it. And so to a certain extent, it's like a mesh network on the internet. It's not about distance, it's about connection. Because it doesn't have a blockchain, it does a few interesting things. One, it makes it so that there is no continuous record. So you can't go back 2 months from now and see all the messages that were ever sent, whether they're encrypted or not, because they're simply not there. They stay on the network for, I believe it's 2.5 days. And then after that point, they are gone from the network if they've been picked up. And actually, you get a confirmation. You get a confirmation when the correct recipient actually has it. Doesn't matter if they've read it. It just matters that their client has received it. Then they grab a local copy of it. I may be a little bit wrong on these technical details. I haven't spent that much time on it, but this is my precursor sort of examination of it. We're going to have on the lead developer from Bitmessage, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, to cover this in more detail.
Is that Jonathan Warren? I just wanted to mention his name because he was the person who published a white paper about this.
I think it's Jonathan Warren. I don't know. I'm still really backlogged on my interviews, so I've got too many names in my head. The other thing it does is because it doesn't have a blockchain, right? There's a problem. If I don't have my Bitmessage client open and running and actively paying attention, then that if I get a message and I'm not logged on for that 2.5 day period, then I don't actually get the message, and there's no way for me to even see that a message was left for me. So the solution that they've come up with is essentially an automatic rebroadcast, where if you don't get a confirmation for the message after the 2.5 days or 2 days that it's been out there, in the wild for it to be picked up, then it sits on it and then it rebroadcasts it 2 days later. And then if it still doesn't get it, then it sits on it and it rebroadcasts it 4 days later for another 2 days. And so it keeps doing this step up thing where it waits a little bit longer and then it checks again to see if it can go out there. So eventually messages should go through, even if you're only turning on your client every once in a while, even though it doesn't have a central record.
That's a really cool solution to that problem. I think we should mention, like, I think this was mentioned before, but this is not really completely instantaneous. It does take a little while for messages to come through, so I wouldn't recommend it for something like instant messaging. It's more for email-like applications, although it is pretty quick. I mean, I think it's less than 4 minutes for a message to go through on average.
That's actually quicker than my email is for Adam at Let's Talk Bitcoin. I have that going through at least one forwarder, and I know it takes at least 10 minutes for me to get a message. So, Bitmessage is competitive in a lot of circumstances than email is in my experience. The other thing that's really interesting about it is that even though it's the super bare bones interface right now with the application, it supports HTML in a really comprehensive way. So you can do really full-featured, like almost newsletters. We've been kind of looking at it and going, could this be a fun thing to work with, to like send out news bulletins? So, again, if you think that's a good idea, then leave a comment on this episode because we're talking about it very seriously right now.
It might be very interesting to see this combined with some long-term storage and blockchain capabilities as an overlay in order to offer some of the notarization and asset attestation services. And I think we've got a segment on that coming up. Here's something to keep in mind. There is permanent storage of Bitmessage. Let's not fool ourselves. All of the Bitmessages are stored at the data center in Utah. Let's not kid ourselves. If you put encrypted stuff on the internet, it gets logged and stored until there's interest to break that key and figure out what it meant. I wouldn't assume that these Bitmessages are just disappearing into the ether after a few days. I would assume they're going into the 1 trillion terabyte storage facility in Utah.
Probably better than just sending an unencrypted email, though, right? A little bit more protection.
That depends of whether you're bringing up red flags and drawing all the attention to yourself just by using it. So it's a double-edged sword, I think.
Yeah, I was looking at a list of words that this data center flags as, potentially threatening to homeland security or whatever. And some of them were so benign. It was like names of cities and like influenza and, like names of cars. It was very strange. So I don't know. They probably have a lot of goo in their system, and potentially anything could get an email or a message flagged. Just something for people to be aware of. I don't know if everybody who's listening has looked into this data center very closely, but yeah, it stores everything. And
yeah, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to assume this has been going on for decades, and really it's just a matter of scale. But I think in recent years, the clear strategy of the interception networks and the various intelligence agencies has been to suck everything up into a giant vacuum and then flag it later and store everything forever.
Come through it when they need to.
Right, exactly.
Dig up something on somebody.
If you want to check out more about Bitmessage, you can go to bitmessage.org, but we should note it is even more beta than Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is still very much a beta, and Bitmessage is even more of a beta than Bitcoin is. And also, it really needs a security audit. There haven't been any, it's an open source project, but there haven't been enough independent confirmations that in fact this is legit and doesn't have kind of glaring flaws in it. So again, right now we're all playing around with it to play around with it and kind of see what this bleeding edge technology is. But if you're going to use it for something real serious, then you're going to want to do your due diligence on it too.
What I love about Bitmessage is kind of the meta issue it brings up, which is that the combination of proof of work, distributed peer-to-peer mesh network, and in some cases, the blockchain, those three technologies can get reused and remashed up to create all kinds of innovation. And what we're seeing is that the proof of concept of Bitcoin is basically driving these little tendrils of innovation in all kinds of directions, where people are taking the basic ideas and making something completely new from them. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very exciting. One of the recent collaborations that's come out of this, it's not even a formal collaboration. I don't think they're working together yet, but one of the pairings with Bitmessage is a project that you may have heard of called Open Transactions. Open Transactions is kind of like the independent open source version of Ripple. that's a really big simplification, and there are some major differences between them. But during my conversation with David Schwartz, the chief cryptographer over at OpenCoin, which is the company behind Ripple, one of the things that he mentioned that was substantially better about Ripple than open transactions was open transactions is a whole bunch of different markets. And each of these markets is a market unto itself. They're considered federated servers where each one is equal, but they're different and owned by different people. And so you get some level of trustability because there's so many people who have so many interests that they're probably not all colluding together is kind of the broad theory behind it. The problem has been, of course, that if you want to do a transaction that involves more than one of these areas, it's kind of complicated because there's no coordination between them. So using Bitmessage as a means of automating communication and coordination between these different servers, between these different federated servers, actually solves this problem in a really comprehensive and still retaining fully open source and full autonomy for all of the things. It's more just a communication means. I'm talking with fellow Traveler actually on Tuesday's show about this exact issue, so we'll have more details on it then.
So speaking of different applications for the concept or idea of Bitcoin, there's somebody who has sort of started what I consider maybe like a precursor to smart property, which is the idea that somehow the Bitcoin blockchain could be used as a record of somebody owning something in the real world, or maybe even not in the real world, maybe on the internet. This person, who is named Manuel Arauz, I think, a 23-year-old developer in Argentina, has made a website and a service called Proof of Existence. And basically, it's a notary service that's based on the Bitcoin blockchain. You pay a small amount. It's something like 5 millibits or something like that. And you get essentially a timestamp that is used to verify that a document exists at a certain point of time. And if you go to the website, which is proofofexistence.com, you can see the most recent documents that have been confirmed in the blockchain. There's green check marks next to them once they've been verified.
So this is like a crazy disruptive tech for notaries, right? I mean, like this is, if you're talking about taking a notary service where it's someone who, you know, whose job is to affirm that and certify that this particular thing happened on this particular point in time. And instead you're saying, okay, well, just upload the file, whatever it is, to this service and pay this incredibly minimal fee. And bam, there you go. It's on a distributed ledger that's housed on, you know, thousands or hundreds of thousands of computers around the world. I mean, what's the point of having a standard notary service anymore?
Well, let me explain what the point is. Let's not confuse technology with institutions. Notary services are institutions that use very antiquated technology, primarily paper register that exists with a state. Essentially, they record your government identity and signature against that paper register, and then they use this special stamp, which is basically just a stamp. And they sign on it.
It's a raised seal, okay, Andreas, get it right.
They basically say, I've been registered with the state and can charge $1 to prove that you have shown me some ID. And as long
Except
as
they charge a lot more than $1.
Yeah, okay. But the basic idea is that this is not a technology, and it's really the institution that matters, the certification and attestation of the state that comes behind it. So while this technology is extremely disruptive and extremely useful, it will take a while before you have the institutionalization that's required for it to have meaning and bearing anywhere else. Now, I think it's fantastic for our environment and a very, very smart use of the technology that exists. But notaries have nothing to fear because they have a government charter that's a monopoly that requires you to pass this little course and get certified and be on the list. And if you're not on the list, you're not a notary. It's as simple as that.
Let's say, for example, I have a innovative thing that I want to work on and I want to register essentially my prior art. Then I don't really need a notary for that. A notary might help for that, but I could use this just as easily and use it to quickly establish, you know, that my white paper, for example. Because what it does is, now again, someone can correct me if I'm wrong here. I believe the way this works is you upload your file to their server and they create a hash of it. And then that hash is what's inserted. So at a later point from any computer anywhere, you can use this service to essentially re-upload that same document, and it gets the hash. And if the hash is correct because the document has not been changed, then it says, yes, that shows up here in the registry, you know, at this particular timestamp, right?
I'm not exactly sure. I'm trying to understand this myself, but from what I understand, there's something where they send a small amount of Bitcoin to two different addresses, and half of each Bitcoin address that it's sent to is replaced with this hash that is generated from your document. And so the Bitcoin is lost, even though it's a little bit, so that's not too big of a deal. But it verifies that your document exists at a certain time.
So this is actually really similar to the to the garbage in the blockchain topic that we addressed a couple of episodes ago, where these are not even functional transactions. These are intentionally bad transactions for the purpose of embedding data into the blockchain that otherwise wouldn't be there. Is that right?
Yes.
So with that in mind, then, I've heard this argument a couple of times that this is a bad thing. People are cluttering up the blockchain and also wasting coins. There's a real concern that even if we're talking about very small fractions of these coins, especially now when the deflationary environment says that the price should go up a lot more in the next couple of years, do you have any concerns about services like this being built on Bitcoin? Should they be using their own blockchain, or is it okay to clutter these things up?
I expect that they'll adjust the price as time goes on in response to market conditions based on how many people are using their service. And right now, he's taking 0.002 or 2 millibits to fund the service, and he's charging 5 millibits. So 3 is going to be lost in the process of, or no, maybe he's keeping 3 and 2 is lost in the process of creating these modifications to the blockchain. But in any case, it's about half of it that's going to keep the service running and half of it's that's being destroyed. But that can probably change at any time. And it's probably difficult to determine a price for a service like this that is going to keep out spammers and be a cost that discourages people from using this for essentially no purpose, for free, but also is low enough that people don't mind basically losing this amount of coin.
If it's not worth the miners' time, they won't mine it. And that's the simple answer. I'm a very strong believer in Bitcoin neutrality as a core functioning principle. And what that says is there simply is no spam on the blockchain. If something is on the blockchain, that's because someone was motivated and paid to include it in the blockchain through their mining activities, and therefore it is useful to someone enough to be paid for. I think it is a very bad idea to start making judgments about what is and isn't a good use of the blockchain, which senders and recipients are valid, what is dust and what isn't dust. Let the market decide. This is Bitcoin neutrality, and if the fee is right, someone will use it.
Do you guys think there might be a little bit of a tragedy of the commons aspect to the blockchain? I mean, it's not quite the same thing. And of course, the tragedy of the commons is basically when there's some property that's, quote, publicly owned, which means it's really owned by no one, and anyone can use it. And so they basically use a lot of the resources and have no incentive to take care of it. And so it kind of breaks down. Do you think the blockchain has any of those elements? I don't know about that, because I know there are lots of people who care about the blockchain and who have an interest in it. But then again, there's no real ownership of it.
Not at all. If this is a commons, there are essentially ticket sellers at each entrance to the commons, and those are the miners. And if you don't pay the price, you don't enter the commons. I'm really not concerned at all. There's a perfect feedback loop. There's a self-adjusting market function. And this is about as efficient a market as ever designed, with the most instant feedback loops possible. So I'm not concerned at all. There is no tragedy here. In fact, just like with IP, if you start deciding what applications are good and what applications are bad over IP and filtering, it destroys the ability of people to innovate without seeking permission. The same thing applies to the blockchain. We have to keep it neutral so that it doesn't matter who the endpoints are or what the application is. All that matters is, did you pay passage for the blockchain? And if you did, your application must be valid enough to gain that price.
It's almost opposite to the commons example that you gave there, because the problem with having publicly owned things where functionally nobody owns them is that there's all this incentive to utilize the resources, but there's no incentive to manage the resources. There's no incentive to actually take care of it. And I think that that's kind of opposite here. With the blockchain, anybody can put things into the blockchain, but it's not like you can take things out and then they're no longer there. So instead of being a subtractive thing where you start off with, say 100 trees or whatever, you don't. Instead, you start off with, this set amount, and then it grows over time. And by growing, its functionality actually increases rather than decreases. So it actually is a very additive process where the more people who are participating and adding to the system, the more value it has, relatively speaking.
Well, there's one argument to be made about the total growth of the blockchain being a problem. But again, that's a problem that is easily solved by applying market principles. If the size of the blockchain becomes a problem, then the prices charged for introducing a certain amount of data into the blockchain will increase accordingly. And it's as simple as that.
Or people will make it less costly, like by hosting the blockchain on, Electrum servers or whatever, make it less costly to have a big blockchain. On the flip side of the idea of tragedy of the commons, there's also comedy of the commons, which is when you gather a lot of people together in a space and make it available for essentially public access or some aspects of public access. Things can happen there which can't really happen on private property that's restricted, like, commerce can take place, people can meet, people can get together, and so forth. And so maybe there are some aspects of that in the blockchain as well, although I agree that it's really not a commons.
Absolutely. And I think in this particular case, what you can translate it to directly is the network effect, which is the availability and broad range of applications that you can build on top of the blockchain. Doesn't only add value to the individual who joins the blockchain, but each individual, each node that joins the blockchain, each bit of data that joins the blockchain increases the value for everyone through the network effect. And that translates directly into the comedy of the commons and really this great viral adoption.
Just to finish off this little article about the notary service, it's not the only one. I did want to mention there's a couple of other blockchain timestamping projects. There's BitNotar and ChronoBit. This has been criticized because it doesn't prove ownership per se. It just proves that a document existed, and it may not even be a precise timestamp because the block time is variable, so it could take a couple minutes, dozens of minutes, maybe up to an hour to actually get it in there. So, there's some criticisms of it, but I think it's cool and it's a first step, and we'll see where it goes.
Let's not think about it as a finished application. Let's instead think of it as an additional protocol layer or services layer that's been added on top of the blockchain, and then imagine what other services can be laid on top of this. Because if all of those features are in fact desired, then using these basic notary services, especially if they have APIs or if they have a standardized way of introducing this stuff in the blockchain, can be left to other developers that create overlay services that perhaps attach hashes to identities or PGP signatures or whatever. I think it presents a tremendous opportunity because really at the end of the day, Bitcoin is an API and these are layered protocols, and we can just develop more and more functionality above them. This is the internet of money, and the applications have not yet been fully developed.
Following up on the comedy of the commons element that you mentioned, there is one other thing. You're right. When you have public spaces where commerce can happen, that is a totally different situation than something where there's a limited resource in there, essentially. But it's interesting to think about that from the fact that lacking that common space where that commerce happens, that's commerce that generally wouldn't happen other places. So from that perspective, and with that in mind, by participating in a system like that, every person who participates actually has an incentive for it to continue existing because they use it and find it useful. It is the complete opposite of that bad scenario where by giving people the ability to network and connect and do business with each other in a way that they otherwise wouldn't be able to under normal circumstances, you cause everyone involved to be very invested in the continued survival of the platform. It's still developing.
I mean, these are all new applications. Bitcoin is a revolutionary concept in itself. But then when you start layering these other services on top of Bitcoin, and I'm sure there will be more that we can't even imagine at this point, but it can be a little difficult to wrap your mind around.
So generally on Let's Talk Bitcoin, I'm the guy who winds up doing the interviews with people, but I'm really happy to be able to share that responsibility with Stephanie Murphy. And so Stephanie, your inaugural non-conference interview was with Charlie Lee of Litecoin. You got together with him really late at night, which I really appreciate because I'm totally a morning person. How'd that go?
I had so much fun talking to Charlie, and I was really happy to have this be, my first interview that came on Let's Talk Bitcoin, besides the ones that were done at the conference, of course. It was more relaxed. You just talk to someone on Skype instead of trying to catch them while they're maybe off to an event at the conference. So we had a little bit more time to really get in depth. And I was excited to talk with him particularly because I am a fan and a user of Litecoin. Now, I tried to be objective and non-biased. I tried to ask him tough questions. You can decide, for yourself about the interview. But I thought he had some really great responses, and I learned some things about Litecoin that I didn't know, which one of the most interesting things was that basically, there's been a lot of talk recently about so-called scam coins. And these are basically alternative blockchains or altcoins that have some degree of pre-mining. So that means that the developers or the dev team mines some coins to incentivize themselves before the project is released publicly. And then, perhaps the value of those coins goes up somehow. They get traded on an exchange, or they even bribe an exchange to carry them with some of the pre-mined coins. And then the value goes up, and then they dump all their coins, the people who got them early, and make a lot of profit and then abandon the project. There's been a lot of talk about this idea of scam coins recently, but Charlie was saying that one of the things that he believes is a key to Litecoin's success was that there was no pre-mining, and he purposely kept it free of that and was aware of that from the very beginning because he had been following some of the other altcoins that came out very early in the history of Bitcoin before I was personally paying attention to them. And he kind of saw what happened to them and was also interested in the script algorithm, and Litecoin was the first coin to utilize that. So it was a really interesting interview, and I'm really glad that he took the time to talk with me.
Well, great. Well, we're going to jump to that right now. And then on episode 13, we'll be running a feature with Peter Bushnell, who's the lead developer on Feathercoin, which is actually an altcoin based off of Litecoin. So we're going to see what he has to say at that point, too.
I love the names. Light as a feather, right?
Yeah.
There's Litecoin, and then there's Feathercoin. It's even lighter.
So let's hear what Charlie has to say.
I am here talking with Charlie Lee, and Charlie is the lead developer for Litecoin. So, Charlie, first of all, welcome to the show. I'm really appreciative that you took the time to talk with me tonight.
Sure. Thanks for having me here.
So the first question I want to ask you is, what is Litecoin for somebody who has never heard of Litecoin before?
Sure. Well, I assume you've all heard of Bitcoin. So Litecoin is just an alternative cryptocurrency to Bitcoin. It's very similar to Bitcoin. Since it's just a fork of Bitcoin, it has all the benefits of Bitcoin plus a few small differences that sets it apart.
What are the differences between Bitcoin and Litecoin? I think a lot of people want to know that.
The word light in Litecoin comes from the fact that it's just a lighter version of Bitcoin. What I mean by that is transactions are confirmed a quarter of the time. So with Bitcoin, blocks are found on average every 10 minutes, but for Litecoin, it's only 2.5 minutes. So transactions are faster. Another difference is, since just like Bitcoin, Litecoin's block reward starts at 50 and halves every 4 years. So with 4 times faster blocks, miners will produce about 4 times as many Litecoins as Bitcoins. So that's like 84 million total Litecoins. And currently there's about 18 million total Litecoins mined. One of the main differences is that Litecoin uses the script as proof of work algorithm. The reason why we use script is that script requires a significant amount of memory to perform the proof of work calculations. So this makes it so that the efficiency difference between, let's say, like GPU mining and CPU mining is not as drastic as it was for Bitcoin. And if ASICs were ever created for Litecoin, they will not push out all the GPU miners like what's happening with Bitcoin right now.
Okay, I was wondering about that. I think a lot of people are curious about how different is script in terms of keeping mining accessible to more people. Do you have any comments about that? It's really not that big of a difference between GPU and CPU mining and then ASIC versus GPU.
That's right. Because it uses a lot of memory and memory's more expensive and GPUs don't have that much memory on them. For Bitcoin, when GPU mining came about, someone first discovered how to do mining on GPUs, it pretty much pushed all the CPU mining out. It became highly unprofitable to CPU mine. That's not the case with Litecoin. A lot of CPU miners stopped mining, but there are still a lot of CPU miners. Similarly, like I said, with ASIC mining, right now, a lot of GPU miners are turning off mining Bitcoins because it doesn't make any sense anymore since ASICs are so much more efficient.
Right. So now nobody at this point has made an ASIC that can mine on script. Is that correct?
As far as I know, nobody has. It's probably
Okay.
because the price is not there yet. It's probably not worth it to invest so much money in creating an ASIC script miner for Litecoin.
Yeah, I think there are some people working on it, though. I've seen some forum posts about that. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't.
These are deliberate changes to the Bitcoin code. Did you determine those changes, or how did you figure that out, and why?
Actually, script mining was introduced by another altcoin called Tenebrix. It was created by someone, a forum user named Artforts. He did some analysis and figured out that it kind of makes sense to use script as proof of work so that CPU mining can still make sense.
Right. So what about the other features? I mean, why change those from the Bitcoin code?
I felt like the 10-minute transaction or block time is a bit long. I think Satoshi was a bit conservative when he decided to choose 10 minutes for the block times because we just have to make sure the blocks are propagated all over the world and people aren't wasting time working on a previous block. So by making block times 4 times faster, blocks are still propagated all over the world within those 2.5 minutes. And now transactions happen 4 times faster. So I think it was a good change. And I think it makes Litecoin better in that sense.
Now, as I understand it, there's another altcoin called Terracoin, and their block time is every minute. Is that correct? Do you think that's too short?
It's hard to say. I haven't really done analysis on whether a minute is better or 2.5 minutes is better. But I know that if it gets really short, then miners waste a lot of time mining on previous blocks. Like before Litecoin was released, there was another coin, I think it was called like Geistgeld, that did blocks every 7 seconds. And it was pretty crazy.
Wow. Yeah, that is very extreme.
Mining blocks all the time and getting orphaned. But yeah, it was an experimental currency to push it to the extreme.
It's almost like a process of biological selection, how the coins that work best become the most popular. And that kind of leads into my next question. You know, Litecoin is definitely not the only altcoin out there, and it's not the first altcoin or Bitcoin fork, as you mentioned before, but it is I would say, the most popular one. And I think there's evidence for that because it has seen a significant price increase. Litecoins are trading around $3 per Litecoin at this point, and it's got relatively widespread recognition. So what do you think is making it popular?
I think a few things. When I first created Litecoin, there were a few alternative cryptocurrencies out there, Xcoin, Solidcoin, and Tenebrix. At the time, there was a growing community that were interested in the alternative cryptocurrencies. It became apparent that altcoins were here to stay, but the problem was that all these coins were created, from my point of view, out of greed. The creators kept a ton of coins to themselves by pre-mining them and hoping to cash out when the coin becomes valuable. So I created Litecoin to make it fair. So I made it so that there was zero pre-mine, released it so that everyone can start mining using the CPU at the same time. So I think that helped make it popular.
I see. Yeah, I bet people really did appreciate that because there are so many coins out there that are called scam coins or pump and dump coins or whatever. And a lot of the controversy surrounding those is just, okay, you know, somebody pre-mines a bunch of them, tries to get them on some exchange, and then, you know, cashes out, and then the coin is pretty much abandoned. So would you say that pre-mining is one of the defining features of a scam coin, so-called?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, one reason to pre-mine is so that the creator just holds a ton of them himself so that he can sell them when a coin becomes worth something. So yeah, another important thing is the change in the proof of work algorithm. I'm sure you heard of a coin like Namecoin. Namecoin ran into a lot of problems when a large percent of the Bitcoin network jumped in to mine it when it's profitable, and then leaving it when it's not profitable, but they leave the difficulty sky high. And Namecoin, the blockchain basically slows through qual while blocks weren't found because the difficulty was so high. So I think having a different proof of work made it such that Litecoin and Bitcoin weren't basically fighting for the same pool of miners. People can GPU mine Bitcoin and then CPU mine Litecoin at the same time. It made us kind of immune to this roller coaster difficulty thing we saw with Namecoin. You're seeing that with all these new altcoins that are script-based coming out these days. People are just jumping on those coins because they're profitable and then leaving them when they're not, causing huge problems for those coins. So I think changing the proof of work algorithm is pretty important.
That's really interesting that you say that. I think it could be considered almost a form of flattery that there are actually Litecoin forks coming out now. Like Feathercoin is one that comes to mind. I'm sure there are others, right? How do you feel about that?
I feel like most of them are just, like you say, scam coins. I mean, it is flattering, but I just feel bad for people who are putting in a lot of money into those coins and seeing the price drop after the creator cashes out.
Do you think there's room for Litecoin and Bitcoin to coexist, or do you think that one coin is going to kind of dominate? I mean, I know there's this analogy that a lot of people use with Litecoins and Bitcoins where they say Bitcoin is like the gold and Litecoin is like the silver. And now, to me, when I hear that, I think, perhaps people would be even more likely to use or to spend or to circulate silver than they would for gold. So maybe Litecoin will come into the predominant use. I mean, what do you think about the relationship, I guess, between Litecoin and Bitcoin?
When I created Litecoin, I wasn't trying to create something to actually replace Bitcoin. I wanted to create something as an alternative to Bitcoin to be used side by side with Bitcoin. So I actually came up with the analogy of Litecoin being silver to Bitcoin's gold. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. It was a good way to position Litecoin. And it fits pretty well. Like the price ratio right now between Litecoin and Bitcoin is similar to that of silver and gold. Well, the goal is that both Bitcoin and Litecoin will be used in transactions similar to how gold and silver were used together at one point.
Speaking of using Litecoin in transactions, I mean, I know that Litecoins are traded on some exchanges, and BTCE and Vercurix come to mind, and there's some other ones too. And there are lots of mining pools for Litecoin. In fact, actually, I wanted to tell you I'm mining Litecoins right now as we speak during this interview.
Cool.
But, there's also an Electrum client for Litecoin, and there's some web wallets for Litecoin. But a common question people might have when they want to use a cryptocurrency is, what is the infrastructure for it? Like, how do I actually use this to do things in the real world? So what am I missing as far as what infrastructure exists out there for Litecoin? Is there more than what I just mentioned?
Yeah, if you go to like the Litecoin wiki, URL is litecoin.info. You'll see like a list of merchants and services that support Litecoins. And it's true that there aren't that many yet. We're kind of about where Bitcoin was 2 years ago. So we're kind of growing. We still have a lot of room to grow. And I bet that you'll start to see a lot of new merchants and even existing Bitcoin services start to accept Litecoin in addition to Bitcoin in the near future. So we'll see.
Are you actively working on that? Trying to get merchants and other people to adopt and accept Litecoin?
Yeah, I've talked to a few merchants. I've talked to a few existing Bitcoin services to try to get them to support Litecoin. They've all heard of Litecoin, obviously, and they're all interested. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. Litecoin smartphone apps could also help a lot with adoption. Is there any development of those going on or any plans for that?
I'm not personally developing any smartphone app, and the Litecoin development team is not. But I'm sure there are other third-party developers that are doing that, working on that right now.
So how big is the Litecoin development team, and how do you talk to each other?
We use IRC mostly. The team is spread all over the world. We have about 6 people working on various different things. The infrastructure, like the code, obviously, for the client, and also making sure that the wiki, the forum, and the homepage, everything is up and running.
Is this your full-time gig to develop Litecoin, or do you do other projects as well?
Well, I have a full-time job, so Litecoin is my side project.
Do you use Litecoin personally? And what about Bitcoin? Do you use Bitcoin also?
Yeah, I use both. I'm a huge believer in Bitcoin and obviously a huge believer in Litecoin. And I try to use Bitcoin, Litecoin whenever I can. But obviously, there's more places to use Bitcoins currently than to use Litecoins. So, like, for example, I've used Bitcoins to buy electronics on Bitcoin Store. I've used Litecoins to buy T-shirts. So, in a few years, I bet I could.
Where do you buy a T-shirt with Litecoin?
There's some crypto shirt. I don't remember exactly what it's called. Site sells T-shirts. There's a few merchants that accepts Litecoins. And I bet in a few years we'll see people using Bitcoins and Litecoins to buy almost anything. So I can't wait for that to happen.
Do you use any other altcoins besides Bitcoin and Litecoin, or is that pretty much it?
That's pretty much it. Before Litecoin, I've mined like a few coins, like Solid Coin, Xcoin. And after I created Litecoin, that's pretty much it.
What do you say to the critics? Because there are going to be critics with any altcoin. I mean, I know you kept it free of pre-mining, which I think is really admirable. But what do you say to the people who say, wow, there's no room for any other currency besides Bitcoin? Litecoin is just undermining Bitcoin, or any other complaint that you get? What do you say to those people?
Well, for one, I don't believe that there can be only one cryptocurrency. People like alternatives. They like to try different things. I also tell them to actually try to use Litecoins. I think you'll find that the fast transactions to be actually a pleasant surprise. And stay tuned. We're working on more things. There's still more to come with Litecoin to differentiate us from Bitcoin. So stay tuned.
Have you gotten any, I guess, feedback on the features? I mean, like, where do you see the Litecoin code going in the future? Can you say anything about that?
Well, right now we're working on pulling in changes from the Bitcoin 0.8 code base. So we'll do that first. And then we're also working on changing our fee structures to make it smarter. We obviously need to reduce the fees. Yeah, we still want to keep it high enough to block transaction spam.
Has that been a problem with Litecoin?
About a year ago, we got attacked with a lot of dust spam. An attacker was sending 0.001 Litecoins to like thousands of addresses, and that created a big bloat in our blockchain. That's when I changed the fees to make it smarter and make it more expensive for these kind of attacks. That means our fees are kind of high right now, given that the price is so high. Do something about that right away.
Do you pay attention to the Litecoin price relative to US dollars or relative to Bitcoin? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I'm just as surprised as anyone to see Litecoin being worth more than $1 this year. I didn't expect that. And likewise, I didn't expect Bitcoin to be worth more than 100 this year. So,
right.
So I don't pay too much attention to it, but I'm pleasantly surprised to see where we're at right now.
Do you think Litecoin is a good investment?
I don't think I can say anything about that.
Okay.
I'll let you guys decide for yourself.
I guess the last thing I want to ask you about is, what are your biggest dreams and hopes for Litecoin? Like, what would you envision years in the future when it's got wider adoption and, you know, perhaps people are able to use it and spend it more easily? Paint a picture for me of what you would like to see for Litecoin in the future.
I would like to see people using Litecoin in addition to Bitcoins, and maybe using a wallet that holds both at the same time. Like, it would be a normal use case to have both Litecoins and Bitcoins, and then maybe use Bitcoins for larger purchases and Litecoins for smaller purchases, and then exchange between them as you need. Yeah, and I really see cryptocurrency taking off in a few years. I see Bitcoins and Litecoins being accepted everywhere. So that's my dream future.
Charlie, that sounds great to me. And where can people get in touch with you online if they want to find out more about you, or if they want to give you feedback about Litecoin or anything else?
Sure. I mean, you can log into IRC. We have a channel, Litecoin, or Litecoin-dev for development-related work. You can also email me at cobley@litecoin.org. Cobley is spelled COBLEE @litecoin.org. If you want to send an email about any other Litecoin related stuff, not to me specifically, you can just send it to contact@litecoin.org also.
And if people want to download the Litecoin client, they can also do that from litecoin.org. Is that right?
Yeah, make sure you download it from litecoin.org. We don't want you to download it anywhere else that might be like a malware link to
right.
or something. So,
yeah, cool. Charlie, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you talking with me tonight.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Stephanie.
Everyone knows that offline storage is the only safe way to store your Bitcoins. Now there's an easy, convenient, and secure way to make Bitcoin wallets for safe offline storage. With the Safe Paper Wallet Kit, you get everything you need to print Bitcoin wallets using your own PC. Store them in a safe deposit box, your home safe, or even your sock drawer. Anything's more secure than keeping them online. Get your kit now at safepaperwallet.com.
Let's Talk Bitcoin is heard each week by thousands of people who are participating in the new digital economy. Our listener base of Bitcoin owners, miners, investors, technologists, and merchants is growing fast. We offer a limited number of short advertising slots in each show to keep our listeners engaged and to provide maximum impact for our sponsors. If you'd like to talk to us about Let's Talk Bitcoin, send us an email to sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com.
If you look at what's going on with the exchanges, you might get the impression that a massive crackdown is happening. I don't think really it's a matter of crackdown, but certainly there's a lot more attention being paid by US authorities on issues of money laundering and regulation of exchanges. So we've seen a number of things happen, and a couple more shoes dropped since we last spoke. OKPay, one of the main channels of currency into Bitcoin, shut down its operations, contributing to various exchanges. So that's one more gateway down. Just last night, I saw an announcement from Mt. Gox saying that they will now verify all transactions and withdrawals and deposits of currency will now require a verified account. In fact, in their announcement, they even hinted that perhaps in the future, Bitcoin withdrawals themselves might require verification. So we're seeing an attempt really to comply more closely with regulations where companies think they can comply, and where they can't, they're simply getting off that game and deciding it's not worth the hassle to do it. And then the other thing that's happened just at the same time is that Liberty Reserve has been prosecuted for, as one poster put it on Reddit, felony failure to hire a lobbyist. We saw a lot of journalists saying this was the biggest money laundering bust in history, which of course is inaccurate. The biggest one was HSBC's money laundering, and no one went to jail. So now we're seeing this very unequal application and selective application of justice. Too big to fail does mean too big to jail. As a result, we're seeing all of these announcements about money laundering around Liberty Reserve and this zero tolerance and very harsh response by the Department of Justice. The very same Department of Justice handled HSBC with kid gloves and gave them a slap on the wrist. There wasn't even enough to account for the profits they made from money laundering. The way I look at it, if you make a mistake that puts money in your pocket, you're going to make that mistake again and again and again. Right. So they've incentivized HSBC to keep doing this, or really any bank to keep doing this, as long as they're too big to jail. It's a really interesting environment we find ourselves in. The small guys trying to comply with regulations that are so onerous that some of them are just given up. Others are scrambling to apply more and more anti-money laundering rules and know your customer rules. And then the biggest mega crimes at the top go completely unpunished. The biggest mega criminals who do giga heists, as I like to call them, when they steal billions, simply just walk free and, in fact, sign book tours, get bonuses, and visit the cocktail parties in DC.
It was interesting to see how fast this action actually came down. Their site was actually legitimately seized, and it has the big, this site has been seized by the U.S. government. I believe it says Department of Homeland Security. There were arrests made of senior executives, and I believe that there were seizures of assets. Isn't that right?
Not only seizures of assets, I mean, just the drama with which this was reported. You would think that it was specifically for trafficking in, stolen IDs and laundering every crime in history's money and, just the worst thing you could possibly imagine, the way that these federal prosecutors are painting this. And of course, they kind of have to do that, I guess, to justify what they're doing. I'm not sure that everyone who was using Liberty Reserve was a criminal at all. I'm very skeptical of that.
Does it matter that Liberty Reserve is not a U.S. company? That was something I was curious about. Is there actually jurisdiction to do this?
They indicted some people who lived in New York who I guess had stolen money from bank machines in different countries around the world. So maybe that's the connection to the U.S. But yeah, I mean, they're based in Costa Rica. How does the U.S. get involved in this, right?
Jurisdiction, schmurisdiction. We live in an era of extraordinary rendition and drone death from above. Or who are we kidding? In fact, the argument can be made that if you live in the U.S., you have better due process than if you live abroad, where they'll extra legally basically hound you until you can't, let's say, leave an embassy. But here's the thing, regardless of whether Liberty Reserve deserve this treatment and in fact committed these crimes, what is really shocking and incongruous is how different the treatment they're getting. The perp walk, the simultaneous arrests all around the world, the accusations that are probably quite inflated, the drama, and then compare that to the absolutely touchy-feely treatment that HSBC got, and their crimes were very much as egregious, if not much more egregious. We're talking about money laundering for the Sinaloa cartel using special bank deposit boxes that could fit right through the teller window and had been custom made so they could literally stick suitcases of money through a teller window on a daily basis. And no one went to jail. No one went to jail. So, and you see this comparison, and it is just really jarring. I think it's becoming obvious that justice has fallen completely apart in this country.
Apparently, they used a provision of the Patriot Act to target this organization. This is according to the New York Times. Yeah, you're totally right about that, Andreas. Jurisdiction, schmurisdiction.
Well, just remember, it's impossible to prosecute the big banks for the mega heist and fraud and corruption and crimes that happened in 2008 because there isn't enough evidence. Please, who believes that? Like, haven't we not seen RICO prosecutions that roll one minor operative after another until you climb the ladder to the top? Can't they wiretap every single one of them? Can't they use a provision of the Patriot Act to go after Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo and Bank of America and HSBC? Sure they can. Too big to jail. That's the bottom line.
I was curious if either of you had ever used it. I mean, maybe you don't want to say, but I've never used it personally.
I want to make it clear that, these guys may be the biggest crooks in the world, or they may be completely innocent. I just have no basis of understanding how that distinction is made, and I have no trust that that distinction is being made, or they're given a chance even to have any due process other than being convicted in the public eye and in the media before anything happens.
Right. The innocent, before proven guilty thing doesn't really seem to have much play anymore. I actually have used Liberty Reserve before. The first time I bought Bitcoin, they were one of the steps in the onboarding process for me getting from my bank account to Mt. Gox. Liberty Reserve is a private currency. It's a private USD-backed online currency. So what that basically means, and this is something that hasn't been working with my head since I heard about this indictment. The way that their whole system works is they basically have a reserve of US dollars. And with that, they issue, using those as backing, their own virtual Liberty Reserve currency that has a 1-to-1 exchange ratio with US dollars because it's backed by US dollars. So if you think about it, that really is one giant money laundering scheme because the money comes in, real money comes in, and then they issue virtual currency that isn't actually tied to any particular dollar bill, but it still represents the same amount of value. And if you want to take it out somewhere else in the system, then you can get other dollar bills. It is laundering the money from a certain perspective. The question is that even avoidable in this circumstance? And even if it isn't avoidable, is that illegal? Is that bad? I mean, I didn't realize that having that sort of system was the same thing as, as doing, money laundering for criminals.
Well, money laundering is basically just transactions that are structured to avoid tracking and auditing by government agencies that have essentially the law backing them to audit and track transactions. So banks that support those regulations and are bound by those regulations are de facto not money laundering if they're following the regulations. And anyone who doesn't follow those regulations, any transaction they do essentially can be seen as money laundering or described as money laundering. And so really money laundering is one of these vague terms that is used to say, well, you're outside the rules of the system. How much of that is actually involved in criminal transactions? Probably not the entire amount that the prosecutors are claiming. And that's really the issue here. They basically just take any transaction associated with it and bundle it all into one big evil conspiracy, even if perhaps a certain percentage or even a majority of the transactions might have been perfectly legitimate.
If I give you a dollar bill and you give me a different dollar bill back, was that money laundering?
I don't even know. It depends who you pissed off, Adam. I mean, that's the whole point of the fact that we have no rule of law, is that the law is applied differently depending on who you pissed off. So can I tell you what's legal? Not really. Anything you do is legal or illegal depending on who you've pissed off. That's basically where we live today.
There was a big focus on Liberty Reserve not verifying people's IDs, which, from what I understand of these anti-money laundering statutes in the U.S., it does run afoul of that. But I don't know. I mean, when you buy Bitcoins through BitInstant, you can go to a CVS and where there's that red telephone thing, right? You give a name and a birthday, but you don't have to verify that in any way. So, of course, it's arbitrary, right?
Just saying, I had to verify my information with them when I went through them, so that may have been something that's changed since then.
Oh, did you have to send in like your driver's license or something?
I didn't have to send in a driver's license, no, but I did, again, it was like 2 years ago. I don't remember exactly the process, but I do remember that there were several steps where with different companies I had to verify my identity through various means. So
maybe that part was overblown. I'm just kind of going off the New York Times article, which was like the most dramatic and sensationalized one I could possibly find.
Oh, no. I'm sure that, the level of verification, that's really important. The level of verification is important. And as these guidelines have been kind of developing for these virtual currencies, and Liberty Reserve ultimately is a virtual currency because it's a privately run currency. So under the definition that they gave, I believe that Liberty Reserve does count as that. So, it's a question of, were these always the rules, or did these become the rules in the recent past, or not so recent past, and then just nobody actually noticed that the rules changed?
Rules. If you piss off the wrong person, they'll make up the rules to shut you up and lock you up. I mean, really, that's what's going on here. Now, I do think that we're seeing some of the legitimate businesses trying desperately to figure out what the rules are and how to stay on the good side of the government and of the law. But, at the end of the day, really the only answer to this is to become too big to fail and too big to jail yourself. So let's hope that some of these exchanges become decentralized enough. There are fewer and fewer individual scapegoats, centralized organizations to shut down, and then become big enough so they can actually afford lawyers and fight arbitrary law.
Do you think that this particular incident is going to have a chilling effect on any other businesses that are out there, or change the way that other businesses are going about this, besides trying to see the more compliance thing? I agree with you. We've already seen that.
Yeah, I mean, Mt. Gox instantly changed this verification scheme overnight last night. I can see a direct correlation between that and the move against Liberty Reserve.
Guys, I'm thinking about this whole concept of money laundering or financial crimes, and I'm not sure that money laundering, in quotes, has a victim. And I'm not even sure, frankly, why it's so important to verify somebody's identity before they're permitted to do some kind of transaction. That's the whole point of Bitcoin, that you could potentially be anonymous if you're just dealing in Bitcoins, right? Or at least pseudonymous. But isn't the actual crime the crime and not like the money that was used to do the crime? Am I missing something? Like if you hurt somebody, if you steal from somebody, that's what I would consider the crime.
We've been moving in this direction for a while, though, Stephanie. You can look at lots of things, and, drug policy is one of them, for example. It's pretty clear that a victim is no longer required for something to be a crime. What is required for it to be a crime is that it is illegal, or could be viewed in such a way as to be seen as being illegal. And that really is enough unto itself.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it from a right and wrong perspective. Again, I think the victim is really important in that respect, but I realize that the law disagrees with me.
Well, I think you might say that the victim is, an organization like Goldman Sachs that can't take advantage of yet another flow of money and tap into it and do some rent seeking.
So or victim quote.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the IRS if it's a matter of tax evasion. And I think that is very, that is a crime and therefore that being prosecuted. I think the key insight here is to realize that money can be controlled, and money laundering is the tool by which money is controlled. And so really it doesn't matter what the crime is. What matters is that if you are the DHS or the DOJ or the FBI and you have a hammer, and that hammer is control over currency, everything you see is a nail. And so they're going to hammer around all of the fiat exchanges, interchange points around the virtual currencies. And whenever one of these currencies has a centralized location, they're going to hammer on that too, because that's all they know how to do. I mean, essentially, these organizations have become asset seizure and confiscation organizations. And between the combination of asset seizure and plea deals, they make sure that nobody actually sees a courtroom, gets to fight for their rights or for clearing their name. The innocent until proven guilty, again, only applies to those who can afford it.
Really what we're talking about here is the difference between natural law and subjective law, I guess. Because natural law, that's what you were talking about, Stephanie. Natural law is like, if someone has something and you want it, it's pretty much implicit that if you take it from them against their will, that's wrong. That's stealing. It doesn't require going to law school in order to figure out that that's probably not something that's morally okay. And same thing with killing people. So there are all these kind of like basic laws that are kind of built into being human.
Yeah, voluntary interactions with other human beings.
Right, exactly. So, where we get caught up in this is that we assume that that's how things work in real life. And I don't really think that it is anymore. I think that we have laws that are created to the benefit of some people and to the detriment of other people. And whether or not that's right or wrong is kind of neither here nor there. The point is that laws that are built like that are hard to understand if you don't specifically read the law and see, okay, this is what's allowed and that's not what's allowed. Whereas with natural law, it's very intuitive because you just kind of already know. So you wind up with this thing where ignorance of the law is no excuse, and yet we have so many laws that don't make sense and that require study that in order to even know, most of the laws or some of the laws, you basically have to devote your life to the study of it.
In fact, that saying, ignorance of the law is no excuse, originally came from the idea that you have no excuse for not knowing about natural laws, like,
right.
Don't kill people, don't hurt people, and don't steal. That's where that expression came from, but it's totally been twisted. And now what we have in the US, I remember listening to somebody who calculated this a couple of years ago, that if you were to read all the federal laws in the US, it would take about 4 lifetimes. So there's no way you could possibly know all the laws, but yet people are kind of, at least the little people, right, who don't have political connections, are kind of held to this impossible standard where there's a book saying that the average person commits 3 felonies per day. If any one of those was found out, your life could be ruined. But these are simple things like having an expired prescription medication in your medicine cabinet, right? Like, who doesn't have that? So you're exactly right, Adam. It's like, if they want to get you for something in this system, they can. And it's not necessarily going to be congruent with just common sense, practical, voluntary interactions that happen between human beings.
The law is a means, and the end, at least the way it's been sold to us as part of the American ideal that I very, very much believe in, the end is justice, and the law is a means. Now, what's become perverted now is 2 things. First of all, the end is no longer justice, it's power, or at least that ideal of justice is fading and the end being power is becoming more and more prominent. And the means have been used to justify that end of power. So law is now an end into itself and used only to consolidate and apply power, and justice is really becoming something fleeting, something that only happens occasionally and only happens as a fluke, rather than being the overriding concern. And that's really, more and more people, I think, are beginning to see that, and that incongruence is becoming more and more obvious. So when you see these injustices happening on a regular basis, and injustice is achieved through law, the entire system has been perverted and turned upside down.
It's a great system. So that's all the time that we have for today. This was a lot of fun, guys. I'm really glad that we were able to just kind of hop back in the saddle here. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Until next time, I'm Adam.
I'm Stephanie.
I'm Andreas.
We'll see you on the blockchain. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Whether you liked, loved, or hated the show, we want to know what you think. Please send all listener mail to mail@letstalkbitcoin.com. Content for this episode was provided by Stephanie Murphy, Andreas M. Antonopoulos, and Charlie Lee. Music for this episode was provided by Jared Rubin. For links to his work, visit www.letstalkbitcoin.com/music. Episode 13 should be a good one. We've got fellow traveler on to talk about Bitmessage and open transactions. And I'm really, really looking forward to that conversation, because it seems like it could legitimately solve a couple of pretty serious problems. Anyways, we'll see you next time.